Welcome to the lesson, Reading a Wine Label. In this lesson, we will cover the various parts of a wine label, appellation versus varietal wine labels, and hints for understanding wine labels. There are 6 parts of a wine label. This includes the producer, the vintage, the region, the alcohol by volume, and the varietal or appellation. In this slide, you can see an example of an American wine label. The producer in this label is Chapelet. The vintage is 2003. The region is Napa Valley. The alcohol is 14.5%. And the varietal or appellation on this label is a varietal, Cabernet Sauvignon. In this slide, you can see an example of a European wine label. While it contains the same type of information as the American wine label, the difference is the use of appellation as opposed to varietal. The producer of this wine is Chateau Le Prieuré. The vintage is 1994. The region Pomerol. The alcohol by volume is 12%, and the varietal or appellation on this label is an appellation, Pomerol. As you noticed in the previous 2 examples, not every label will contain the same information. Many different countries and regions have laws regarding how you can label a wine. One of the most important distinctions is within the varietal or the appellation. Most New World wine labels will mention their varietal, or in the case of a blend, the multiple varietals used. These countries include North and South America, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. In the Old World, it is typically not common to mention the varietal, but instead assume that the consumer already knows the typical blend and style of that region. Therefore, they include the region and appellation on their label. These countries are mainly those found in Europe. Here you can see 2 examples of wine labels, Chablis from Domaine Drouhin and an unoaked Chardonnay from the producer Lincourt, located in the Santa Rita Hills, California. Drouhin expects the consumer to know that the villages of Chablis typically produce unoaked Chardonnay. Lincourt, on the other hand, tells the consumer exactly what is in the bottle. Now that we understand the basis of wine labels, let's cover a few hints for understanding wine labels. The word reserve on a label can be indicative of barrel aging or can tell us a bit about the quality level of the wine within a handful of regions. In most areas, it is used by the producer to indicate that this is their top-tier wine. Spain, where the laws for labeling reserves are very strict, is the only country where the word reserve has a specific and controlled meaning. Outside of Spain, the term reserve means very little to wine, since there are few or no laws regulating it. Estate status indicates whether a wine was produced or bottled on the property. This can be an indicator of status depending on the region. Every country uses different words for labeling this. In the US, it may simply say estate, estate bottled, or estate vineyard. In France, it may say Mise en bouteille au Château Domaine. This translates to bottled at the castle or field. Producer indicators are words on the label that are usually part of, followed by, or after the producer name. Learning these can simplify the reading of labels. Here are a few examples of producer indicators, which can mean the vineyard or the winery itself. Spanish words include pago, finca, marqués, castillo, and dominio. French words include chateau and domaine. And the Italians use words like tenuta, castello, and produttor. So let's quickly recap today's lesson, reading a wine label. There are 6 parts of a wine label: producer, vintage, region, alcohol by volume, and varietal or appellation. When comparing appellation versus varietal wine labels, remember that most New World countries will tell you exactly what varietals are in the wine, while most Old World countries will assume that you already know the typical varietals and style of a specific region or appellation, and will only mention those on the label. And finally, we discussed a few helpful hints for understanding wine labels. Reserve wines are indicative of barrel aging or the quality level of a wine. In Spain, this term is extremely important, and in the rest of the world, the term reserve means very little. When estate wine is located on the label, it simply means that the wine was produced and bottled on the property. There are many different ways of mentioning producer indicators. Such words include chateau, finca, winery, and tenuta. And that is the end of the lesson reading a wine label. Don't forget to check out the information and resources available in the course site. If you have any questions, you can always ask your teachers. See you in class!